Ambassador Kim Hannah walked through the long crystal hallways of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. Her black diplomatic uniform felt heavy today, heavier than usual. She carried a small data pad with the morning's reports from human colonies across the galaxy. Most were good news, but one report made her stomach twist with worry. The main council chamber stretched out like a vast cathedral made of living crystal. 47 different species sat in their specially designed pods, each one built to accommodate their unique biology. The Zephyrians with their blue scales needed warm, humid air. The Rigelians required low-gravity fields around their tentacle bodies. The insect-like Centaurians buzzed quietly in their hive pods. At the far end sat the humans. Just one small pod for the entire human race. It had been that way for 73 years, ever since humanity first made contact with galactic civilization. They were always polite, always helpful, but never quite considered equals by the older species. Hannah took her seat as the session began. The familiar sounds of the translation matrix hummed to life, converting dozens of alien languages into something each species could understand. She had grown up with these sounds. Her grandfather had been one of the first human ambassadors, and her father had served here too. Diplomacy was in her blood. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. His voice boomed through the speakers, confident and commanding. Respected members of the council, he began. Today we discuss a matter of great importance to my people. Hannah listened as he explained about the sacred breeding grounds. She had heard about this in the morning briefings. The Zephyrians claimed their ancestors had once lived in the Kepler sector, long before humans had arrived and built colonies there. Now they wanted those worlds back. The human settlements must be moved, the Chancellor declared. We have found other planets for them. Not as nice, perhaps, but good enough for their needs. A few species made sounds that might have been laughter. Hannah felt her cheeks burn with anger, but she kept her face calm. Diplomats did not show emotion in the council chamber. That was the first rule her grandfather had taught her. The Chancellor continued talking, describing how easy it would be to relocate the human families. He spoke about them like they were furniture being moved from one room to another. 3 million people, including children who had been born on those worlds and had never known any other home. The relocation will take only 6 months, he said with a dismissive wave. Humans are adaptable. They will manage. One by one, other species began to speak in support. The Andromedians talked about respecting ancient claims. The hegemony of suns mentioned the importance of religious sites. The Rigelians spoke about maintaining galactic harmony. Not one of them mentioned the human families who would lose their homes. Not one asked what humanity thought about this plan. They simply assumed humans would agree, because humans always agreed. Humans were reasonable. Humans were cooperative. Humans never caused trouble. When the debate ended, the voting began. Hannah watched the display board as species after species lit up their approval signals. Green lights appeared across the massive screen like stars coming out at night. Each light represented millions of beings who thought it was perfectly fine to uproot human families for the convenience of others. The final count appeared on the screen. 847 votes in favor, 1 vote against. Only humanity had said no. Chancellor Zexmore smiled, showing rows of sharp blue teeth. The matter is settled then. The humans will be relocated within 6 months. I am sure Ambassador Hannah will help make this transition smooth for her people. The chamber fell quiet. All eyes turned to the small human section where Hannah sat alone. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling shaky but her voice steady. For 73 years, she began, her words carried clearly through the translation system, humanity has served this council faithfully. We have helped solve your problems. We have translated between species who could not talk to each other. We have shared our technology and our knowledge freely. She paused, looking around the vast chamber. Some aliens met her eyes, but many looked away. We have mediated your trade disputes and prevented your wars. When the Rigelians and Andromedians could not agree on mining rights, we found solutions that made both sides happy. When the plague struck the Outer Rim, human doctors worked day and night to find a cure. We asked for nothing except the basic respect owed to any thinking species. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Today, You have shown us exactly what you think that respect is worth. You vote to destroy our homes, scatter our families, and uproot our children, all without even asking what we think about it. The Andromedian delegate waved a tentacle dismissively. Ambassador Hannah, surely you are being emotional. Humans have always been reasonable people. We can discuss compensation, relocation assistance. We were reasonable, Hannah said, her voice now carrying a hardness that made several translation systems stutter. We are no longer interested in being reasonable with people who see us as things to be moved around for their convenience. She began packing her data pad and documents with careful, deliberate movements. The chamber watched in silence as she prepared to leave. This council has made its decision, she said finally. Therefore, humanity hereby withdraws from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will no longer participate in your meetings, mediate your disputes, or help with your problems. The massive doors of the council chamber opened as she approached them. The sound echoed through the crystal halls like thunder. Live with the consequences, she said, and walked out. The doors closed behind her with a finality that would change the galaxy forever. Trade Minister Lee Dongwu stood in his empty office on Nexus Prime, looking at the boxes packed and ready to go. His desk was clean for the first time in 15 years. The walls that once displayed certificates of galactic trade agreements now showed only empty spaces where the frames had hung. His assistant knocked on the door. Sir, the transport is ready. All human personnel have been evacuated from the station. Dongwu nodded and picked up the last box. 3 days ago, he had been one of the most important people on Nexus Prime, managing trade routes that connected dozens of star systems. Now, he was just another human going home. The evacuation had been swift and silent. Every human diplomat, trader, and worker had simply packed up and left. No explanations, no angry speeches, no dramatic gestures. They just disappeared. Commander Park Minho received the final message from Earth while his ship waited at the edge of human space. All borders are now closed, the transmission said. No foreign vessels will be permitted entry. All human personnel are to return home immediately. He looked at his navigation charts, marking the new reality in red lines. Human space was now off limits to the rest of the galaxy. The trade routes that had carried goods and passengers for decades would have to find new paths, if they could find any at all. The first to notice the change were the Centaurian merchants. Captain Zikhai had been flying the same route for 20 years, carrying rare crystals from the inner worlds to the manufacturing centers near the rim. His ship approached the usual waypoint in the Kepler Nebula, expecting to find a human traffic control station that had guided ships safely through the dangerous energy fields. Instead, he found empty space. The station was gone, not destroyed but simply absent, as if it had never been there at all. His communications officer tried all the standard frequencies, calling for guidance through the nebula. Only silence answered. Without human navigation assistance, the nebula was impassable. The energy storms could tear apart a ship's hull in minutes. Zikhai had no choice but to turn back, his cargo hold full of crystals that would never reach their destination. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. The Andromedian freighter Deep Current found itself stranded at what had been a routine fuel stop, the human-operated station now dark and empty. The Rigelian passenger liner Harmony discovered that the human translators who had made interspecies travel possible were simply gone. Within a week, the carefully balanced systems of galactic civilization began to break down. Dr. Yoon Soo-jin had been mediating a trade dispute between the Rigelians and Andromedians for 30 years. The two species had very different ideas about mining rights in shared asteroid fields. Without her patient negotiations, old anger flared up quickly. "The Andromedians are stealing our rocks," shouted the Rigelian trade representative, his tentacles writhing with fury. "Those asteroids belong to no one," the Andromedian delegate replied, her voice crackling through the translator. "We have mined there for centuries." In the past, Dr. Yoon found a compromise that made both sides happy. She understood both cultures, spoke both languages, and had endless patience for their complaints. Now she was gone, back on Earth, and the two species had no idea how to talk to each other without her help. Within days, both sides began moving warships toward the disputed asteroid fields. The medical crisis hit the hegemony of suns even harder. A plague had been spreading through their outer colonies for months, and Dr. Cho Young-sik had been working day and night to find a cure. His research combined human medical knowledge with alien biology in ways that had never been tried before. The morning after humanity's withdrawal, his laboratory stood empty. His research notes were gone, his equipment powered down, his samples destroyed. The hegemony's own doctors tried to continue his work, but they lacked his understanding of human-developed treatments. The death toll began to climb. But perhaps the most serious problem came from an unexpected source. The Galactic Banking Consortium discovered that almost half of all interspecies transactions had been processed through human computer networks. These systems had worked so smoothly that no one had thought about what would happen if they suddenly stopped. Now they were finding out. Bank transfers that should have taken minutes were failing completely. Trade agreements that depended on instant payment authorization fell apart. The financial networks that connected hundreds of worlds began to collapse like a house of cards. On Nexus Prime, the Council tried to hold emergency sessions, but even these simple meetings became impossible. For decades, humans had developed the protocols that allowed dozens of different species to communicate effectively. Without these systems, Council meetings turned into chaos. The Zephyrians roared in their deep voices, while the Centaurians buzzed in frequencies that hurt other species' hearing organs. The Andromedians communicated through scent releases that made the air unbreathable for oxygen-breathing species. Translation systems crashed as they tried to handle languages that had no common reference points. Chancellor Zexmore tried to call for order, but his words were lost in cacophony of untranslated alien voices. The elegant chamber that had once showcased the unity of galactic civilization now sounded like a zoo at feeding time. Most disturbing of all were the reports coming from the edges of human space. Long-range sensors detected massive construction projects and ship movements on a scale never seen before. But when alien vessels tried to investigate, they found impenetrable barriers and polite but absolute refusals to communicate. The humans had not just withdrawn from galactic politics. They had vanished completely, leaving behind only the growing realization of how much the galaxy had depended on their quiet competence. The silence was deafening. Ambassador Veltar stared at the holographic display, showing the edge of human space. The border glowed red on his screen, marking territory that had become as unreachable as the center of a black hole. His ship, the Rigelian Hope, floated just outside the invisible line that humanity had drawn around their worlds. "Try again," he told his communications officer. Though he already knew what the response would be, the young Rigelian's tentacles danced across the control panel, sending another carefully crafted message toward human space. They had tried 17 different approaches over the past 8 months. Formal diplomatic requests, trade proposals, even personal appeals to humans they had known for decades. The answer was always the same automated response. Human space is currently closed to all foreign vessels. Please maintain safe distance and have a pleasant day. "Sir," his aide whispered, "the Merchant Guild is sending angry messages again. They want to know when the Kepler route will reopen." Veltar's skin changed to a darker shade of blue, showing his frustration. The Kepler route had been humanity's greatest gift to galactic trade. Before humans discovered the safe path through the dangerous nebula, cargo ships had to take a journey that lasted 3 months to reach the outer colonies. The human route cut that time to just 2 weeks. Now the route was dark. The navigation beacons that had guided millions of ships safely through the nebula had gone silent. The way stations where crews had stopped for fuel and repairs stood empty. Without human guidance, the nebula had become impassable again. Across the galaxy, other species were learning similar lessons about how much they had depended on human help. The Andromedian Collective had tried a more direct approach. Admiral Ketvar had taken a battle fleet to what had been a busy human trade station, planning to demand answers. Instead, they found empty buildings and dark landing bays. No signs of violence, no damage from hasty evacuation. The humans had simply cleaned everything and left, taking their technology with them. "Search every room," Ketvar had ordered, but his soldiers found nothing useful. Computer systems had been wiped clean, equipment removed, even the basic life support systems shut down. It was as if the station had never been used at all. The hegemony of suns had tried a different strategy. They broadcast formal apologies on every frequency they could reach, sending the messages toward human space in hopes that someone would listen. We acknowledge that mistakes were made in the council vote. Their message said, the hegemony wishes to reopen diplomatic talks with humanity. We are willing to discuss compensation for any inconvenience caused. The messages disappeared into the void without any reply. Human space swallowed them up like a hungry mouth, giving nothing back. Desperate times call for desperate measures. The council had finally decided to approach the few hundred humans who lived outside human space, hoping these individuals could serve as go-betweens. Dr. Han Jiwoo had been working at the Centaurian Medical Center for 12 years, helping treat diseases that affected multiple species. She was known for her kindness and her skill at making alien biology work with human-developed medicines. Surely she would help. The Centaurian delegation found her in her laboratory, working late as usual. Her small human form looked tiny, surrounded by the tall, insect-like Centaurians. Dr. Han, the delegation leader buzzed to his translator. We need your help. Can you contact your government? Ask them to reconsider their position? Dr. Han looked up from her microscope, her expression polite but firm. I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. I'm a doctor, not a diplomat. My job is to heal people, not to carry political messages. But surely you understand our situation, another Centaurian pleaded. Trade has collapsed. Our colonies are struggling without human-managed supply routes. I understand your problems, Dr. Han replied quietly, but I also understand why my people left. If you want to contact Earth, you'll have to find another way. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. Human scientists, artists, and traders who had made lives among alien species all gave the same answer. They would continue their work, but they would not serve as messengers for governments that had treated humanity as expendable. The most disturbing reports came from intelligence services trying to monitor human activity. Something big was happening inside human space, but no one could figure out what. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures near human worlds. Construction projects on a scale that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built before. Fleet movements that suggested military preparations. But for what purpose? Captain Nam Suk-jin's ship, the Determination, had been spotted near several star systems, but attempts to communicate with him failed completely. The ship would acknowledge hails with a polite message. Thank you for your interest, but we have no comment at this time. Then it would simply disappear, moving faster than any human ship should have been able to travel. The technology was all wrong. Human ships had always been reliable but unremarkable, built for function rather than elegance. These new vessels moved with a grace that suggested advances the galaxy hadn't imagined possible. Back on Nexus Prime, the council chamber had become a symbol of everything that was falling apart. Without human diplomatic protocols, meetings descended into chaos. Species that had barely tolerated each other for centuries now found themselves unable to work together on even simple problems. The Zephyrian Chancellor, who had been so confident 8 months ago, now looked tired and worried. His own empire was suffering as trade networks collapsed and old conflicts flared up without human mediation. Perhaps, he said quietly during one particularly difficult session, we should have listened more carefully to what the humans were trying to tell us. But it was too late for listening. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the difference between weakness and patience, and the cost of taking good neighbors for granted. The human fleet appeared at the Kepler Junction without warning, like ghosts materializing from empty space. Admiral Ko Unesio stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Sovereignty, watching as 57 ships took their positions around the critical hyperspace crossroads. The vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Gone were the boxy, functional designs of old human ships. These new vessels moved with flowing grace, their hulls seeming to bend light around them. They positioned themselves with perfect precision, not blocking the trade routes, but simply present. Admiral, her communications officer reported, were receiving multiple hails from passing ships. They want to know our intentions. Ko studied the tactical display. Merchant vessels from a dozen different species waited nervously at the edge of the junction, unsure whether to proceed. A hegemony patrol squadron hung back at maximum sensor range, clearly worried but afraid to come closer. No response to any communications. Ko ordered. Maintain position and wait. The same scene played out across 37 star systems simultaneously. Human fleets appeared at every major trade route, hyperspace junction, and strategic choke point in the galaxy. Not one shot was fired. Not one threat was made. The ships simply took position and waited. For 6 hours, the standoff continued. Then the hegemony of suns made their move. Admiral Vextalk commanded 12 heavy battleships, each one massive enough to destroy a small moon. His species had ruled this sector for over 1,000 years, and he was not about to be intimidated by upstart humans, no matter how advanced their ships looked. All vessels, advanced attack formation, he broadcast on open channels, making sure everyone could hear his confidence. These humans are trespassing in neutral space. We will escort them back to their borders. His fleet moved forward like a wall of armored death, weapons charging and shields at maximum power. The human ships waited calmly in their path, showing no signs of alarm or preparation for battle. Ko watched the approaching hegemony fleet with detached interest. Her orders were clear, and she intended to follow them exactly. Admiral, her tactical officer called out, "They're powering weapons. Multiple target locks on our position." Acknowledged, Ko replied calmly. "Defensive measures only. Remember, we are not here to fight." The first hegemony salvo lit up space with brilliant energy beams and explosive missiles. The attack was devastating enough to crack a planet's crust. But when the light faded, the human ships hung in space unchanged, their hulls gleaming without so much as a scorch mark. Admiral Vextalk stared at his displays in disbelief. His weapons had simply done nothing. The energy beams had been absorbed or deflected by fields he couldn't detect. The missiles had been gently pushed away by invisible forces. "Fire again," he roared, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. All ships, maximum firepower. Wave after wave of destruction crashed against the human vessels with no effect. The human ships didn't even bother to return fire. They simply existed in the path of the hegemony fleet, as unmovable as mountains. Then something strange began to happen. The hegemony ships found themselves drifting sideways, pushed by forces they couldn't identify. Their engines strained against the invisible pressure, but it did no good. Slowly, gently, but absolutely irresistibly, they were being moved away from the trade route. Admiral Vextalk tried to ram the nearest human ship with his flagship, pouring all power into his engines. But as he approached, the human vessel seemed to slip aside like water, while his own ship was caught in a field that turned his desperate charge into a graceful curve away from his target. For 12 hours, the hegemony fleet raged against forces they couldn't understand or fight. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their tactics meant nothing against an enemy that refused to be engaged. Like children having a tantrum, they exhausted themselves against an opponent that simply would not be moved. Finally, as the ships found themselves gently but firmly pushed to the very edge of the star system, Admiral Vextalk received a transmission that will be remembered across the galaxy. "This is Admiral Ko Unesio of the Human Sovereignty Fleet." The voice was calm, carrying the absolute certainty of someone who held all the advantages and knew it. Ko's image appeared on screens throughout the hegemony fleet, showing a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform. Her expression neither angry nor triumphant, just final. "Humanity no longer participates in galactic politics," she continued. "We will defend our interests and our allies. Everyone else should make their own arrangements." The transmission ended as simply as it had begun. The human ships remained in position, their message delivered not through words but through the demonstration of power that words could never match. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed. The species that had dismissed humanity as junior partners now faced a reality they were completely unprepared for. The humans had never been weak. They had simply chosen to be patient. Now their patience was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Indifference backed by overwhelming technological superiority. The Rigelian merchant captain, who had been waiting at the edge of the Kepler Junction, finally received permission to pass. The human ships moved aside just enough to allow safe passage, their actions polite but impersonal. The captain's cargo of rare metals would reach its destination, but only because humanity permitted it. The old galaxy, where strength was measured in the size of fleets and the volume of threats, had ended. In its place was something new. A universe where the humans set the rules not through conquest, but through the simple demonstration that they no longer needed anyone else's permission to do anything. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human sovereignty had begun. Ambassador Jang Min-Seo of the Ethereal Collective stepped carefully through the damaged corridors of what had once been the Grand Galactic Council headquarters. Broken display panels flickered with old information, and several sections had been sealed off due to system failures that no one knew how to fix. His ethereal form, naturally translucent and flowing, seemed to shimmer with uncertainty as he entered the main council chamber. The massive hall that had once housed 48 different species now held barely 20 delegates, and many of those looked tired and defeated. "You wish to join our council?" wheezed Ambassador Veltar, his blue skin now pale with stress. The Regellian, who had once been proud and confident, now seemed bent under the weight of trying to hold together something that was clearly falling apart. Jang looked around the chamber with growing concern. Empty delegate pods sat dark and unused. The translation system sparked and stuttered, sometimes leaving speakers talking in languages no one else could understand. The air recycling system made strange noises that suggested it needed maintenance no one knew how to perform. We had heard that this was the primary governing body of galactic civilization, Jang said politely, though he was beginning to doubt his information. A bitter sound that might have been laughter came from the Centaurian delegate. "Governing? We can barely govern ourselves anymore. Half our trade routes are closed, 3 regional wars are burning out of control, and the Andromedians haven't sent a representative to these meetings in 6 months." Through the great viewport, Jang could see 2 very different sights. To his left, the old council district showed clear signs of decline. Ships moved slowly and inefficiently through outdated traffic patterns. Several docking bays stood empty, their human design systems now too complex for other species to maintain properly. But to his right, something very different was happening. A human trade station gleamed in the distance, surrounded by the organized flow of dozens of different ships. The traffic moved with smooth precision, and even from here Jang could see the signs of prosperity and efficiency. "Perhaps," suggested a young Regellian aide, "your people should speak to the humans first." Veltar's tentacles twitched with what might have been embarrassment. The humans withdrew from galactic politics 2 years ago, but they remember their friends, and when they choose to give advice, it's still worth hearing. Jang's features shifted with curiosity. They withdrew, but they seemed quite active over there. Active, yes, Veltar admitted, but only with those who treat them with respect. The rest of us, well, we learned too late what we had lost. As if summoned by their conversation, a soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. The main display activated, showing the familiar calm face of Admiral Ko Unesio. Her image was clear and steady, unlike the flickering displays elsewhere in the chamber. Ethereal collective vessel harmony's echo. Her voice carried the quiet authority that had become humanity's signature. "This is Admiral Ko of the Human Defense Fleet. We've been monitoring your approach to the system. When you're finished with your business at the council station, you're welcome to visit our trade facility. We're always interested in meeting peaceful species." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in thoughtful silence. "You see," Veltar said quietly, "the humans don't mediate our problems anymore, but they haven't become hostile. They simply choose their friends more carefully now." As Jang prepared to leave the failing council headquarters, Veltar shared one final story that explained everything. "The Zephyrians learned this lesson in the hardest way possible," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of bitter experience. 6 months after the humans withdrew, Chancellor Zexmore demanded that they return to mediate the breeding ground disputes. When no response came, he decided to take what he wanted by force. Jang listened carefully as Veltar described how a massive Zephyrian fleet had moved toward the disputed human colonies, expecting to find the same peaceful, cooperative people they had always known. The fleet was found a week later, Veltar continued, drifting safely in interstellar space. Every ship intact, every crew member alive and unharmed, but all their weapon systems had been completely disabled. Not damaged, disabled, as if they had been designed never to work in the first place. The most unsettling part, Veltar explained, was that no human ship had ever been detected. No battles, no explosions, no dramatic confrontations. The Zephyrian fleet had simply been corrected, like children having their toys taken away by a patient but firm parent. The Zephyrians haven't left their home system since. Veltar finished. They finally understand that the humans were never weak. They were just kind, and now their kindness is reserved for those who deserve it. An hour later, Jang found himself aboard the human trade station. The difference was immediately obvious. Everything worked perfectly. The air was clean and fresh. The gravity was comfortable for dozens of different species, and the translation systems handled even the most complex languages without effort. Captain Lee Hyun-woo, the station commander, greeted him personally. Unlike the stressed and tired aliens at the council headquarters, the human appeared relaxed and confident. "Welcome to Haven Station," Lee said with genuine warmth. "We prepared quarters suitable for your people's needs. Take all the time you need to decide what kind of relationship you'd like to build with us." As Jang settled into his temporary quarters, he reflected on the choice facing his people. They could align themselves with the failing council, try and maintain the old ways that clearly no longer worked, or they could learn to interact with this new humanity, still helpful and fair, but no longer willing to sacrifice their own interests for the sake of others. The galaxy had learned too late that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their military power. It had been their willingness to help others solve problems and build connections across the vast emptiness of space. Now that gift was offered only to those who had proven themselves worthy of it. The galaxy was colder and more dangerous than before, but for those willing to earn humanity's respect, it also held possibilities that the old order had never imagined. The age of taking human kindness for granted was over forever,